There we go. It's all working. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Sunday Night Live. This week, we are once again going out to everybody at Shrubs, but also sharing our broadcast with people from Mead Hill, Whitefield, Steam Court, Heaton Park, Holy Law Schools as well. So you're all very much welcome tonight. We will give it a couple of seconds for the audience to build up a little bit. Rabbi, welcome back to Sunday Night Live.
It's been a bit difficult to watch you talk to everybody else and not to have a voice. But Rabbi without a voice, what's that?
Well, you've got your voice back. Obviously, wishing you you've got through it now, so I don't need to wish you a refuah shalema. But
the question is, did I have it? How bad did I have it? I had it very light, so somebody said you might not get antibodies from having it so light. I only lost my sense of smell, and for 1 or 2 days, I was feeling slightly off. I said to people that I've had colds that have been worse than this.
Great. Well, you're relatively young and relatively fit as well, so you managed to get through it. Right. This week's topic is mental health, which has very much been it's been a topic that's been on everybody's minds, at least for the last year, and has particularly become very pertinent during COVID and during lockdown. We are joined this evening by Johnny Weinberg, trustee of Jewish Action for Mental Health. Good evening, Johnny.
Good evening, David. Good to see you.
Hi.
Good evening, Robert Eisenberg as well.
So I'm going to sort of give a little bit of a background as far as I can see it as an outsider. I'm not affiliated with Jewish Action for Mental Health in any way, but I just want to state it as I saw it. About a year ago now, the Manchester community as a whole were beset by a particular tragic event which involved the suicide of a very young teenager. And this event managed to sort of strike deep into the heart of every average Jewish family in the area. The young lady in question went to the right sort of school, came from the right sort of family, and we all woke up one morning and discovered this news, and we're all asking the question: how did we get to this? And one of the most, I suppose, beautiful things to come out of this, if anybody can say that, is that the Jewish community in Manchester took it upon themselves to examine the structure of our society in a microcosm, and to see how we are responding to mental health issues. And out of that, Jewish Action for Mental Health was born. But these events were precipitated by a mass gathering that was held actually in our shul. It took place in the Hilton Suite. Rabbi, you were very, very much involved in organizing it at the time.
And I would say a lot more people get more credit than I do.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, I think we're going to be hearing from Sandy, Dr. Sandy Mann, a little bit later. Sandy was obviously one of the key proponents of this. Absolutely. But I guess, Johnny, if I could ask you this, one of the things that made this gathering of minds unique was that if you were to look out across the Hilton Suite that evening, past the Mechitza and beyond, it was very clear that we had representatives of every single section of our society. And that is something which is in a North Manchester Jewish community is more rare than it is common. And it was just amazing to see that this one event made us all want to sit up and pay attention. So, Johnny, over to you. Maybe tell us a little bit about how it evolved and how it grew.
Yeah, it was actually a decade after we'd had something to some extent similar, a conference around mental health, where we brought together some professionals. And again, we managed to get that cross-communal feel. I think we had about 150, 200 people there. But this was even bigger. This was around about 700 people, and fire safety. Yeah, we made sure it was okay, but it was the Hilton Suite was packed like you've never seen. And I think it was a response not just to one suicide, but actually to 3 suicides that happened in the few months preceding. It was February 2019, a chilly night, but people wanted to come and wanted to talk about what we could do. And so, yes, we had professionals there, and we wanted people to talk with each other, and we got that feel that here was something that needed to carry on. So Sandy initiated it and chaired it, and latterly we formed Jewish Action for Mental Health, and then looked at what the need was in the community. And slowly we were doing some of that work. And so we were, looking at counselling, looking at what we could do in terms of young people. And then as we were doing that, and we'd started to offer some free counselling through students and so on, suddenly COVID hit. So that made a massive change. And I don't know if you want me to share some of, I've got some slides, but it's up to yourself what you want me to do just to tell that story.
Yeah, if you would, just to sort of give us a few of the facts and the figures to help people get their head around how big this is.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so if I just share this, and hopefully this will work nicely. Yeah.
There we go.
So again, just that background. In 2009, we had Chizuk, who were very active and doing, again, that sort of befriending with volunteers and counselling support, which was fabulous. And then they were part of this initiative that happened in 2010, a Manchester Jewish Mental Health Partnership, which eventually became a Manchester Jewish Mental Health Alliance. And that's kept going in different forms. I know David Marshall of the Shomra, I'll mention in a second, has been very active in keeping that going. And in 2016, Chizuk, having withdrawn from Manchester for various reasons, we set up Neshama. And again, that was Dr. Marshall, along with others, recognizing that we needed these volunteers to befriend and support people who were facing mental illness, mental health issues. And then, as you've just heard, 2019, here's the event that we ran. And what you'll see there is so many other organizations supporting it. There's 24 different organizational logos there. That doesn't even have all the shuls on who were supportive as well. It was over 30 organizations who want to support this. And some will deliver mental health support, like the Fed or Herschel Weiss Center and others. And some not. Some have, just work with people who need that support. So it was quite an amazing event, like I said. So here we are. We hit 2020. COVID comes. And what we did, having developed this quite nascent, quite new organization, a year old, we partnered up with Neshama, which had been going for the previous 4 years, and put this joint project together. We were very lucky to get funding from the Jewish Leadership Council, Greater Manchester Health and Social Care Partnership, and luckily we've got lottery funding to carry this on as well. So we're going to be carrying on delivering this, certainly for the next few months, but hopefully beyond. In terms of what we've done, we've delivered free therapy and counselling to over 100 clients in that period. We've got a database of 35 counselling therapists, all who are registered professionally, and 21 so far have been allocated clients. And it's an amazing resource that we've got in the community. We've done Zoom supervision for those therapists and counsellors. We even had a self-care art workshop because they need caring for as well. And meanwhile, our partner Shoma recruit and train 52 volunteers as befriends and mentors, and delivering that direct befriending and mentoring support, 43 clients and growing by phone, online routes. Quite an amazing job in terms of that voluntary thing with that professional backup within there as well. We've had support groups for parents who are homeschooling, a mental health support group for women who are pregnant or who've given birth during the lockdown since March. And it does go on, art therapy workshops. There you see one, Doreen sharing a wonderful picture over Zoom. Weekly mums and babies social distance walk in the park, and there they are, hopefully carrying on throughout the winter. Weekly mindfulness sessions, again, Neshama have that on their website if people want to check it out. Cooking workshops, which have been amazing, again, people, and the feedback's been fabulous. Current affairs discussions on Zoom, community professionals coming together, amazing amount of work that we've been doing. And what we've found in terms of the clients who've been coming, those 100+ people for counselling and therapy, is the main issues being around anxiety and then depression. People anxious about the situation or about various things in their lives. But we've also had those people who've been bereaved or who have social phobias or other issues as well. So we've been looking to respond to that and allocating people to the appropriate therapists. And what we've also made sure that we do is evidence our delivery. So, we've got that was 157 calls to helplines. That was in 4 months, that was actually up to the end of October. We respond to within 24 hours. We then do what's known as a triage to see what sort of support somebody needs and match them with a therapist really quickly and for free, which is very unusual for anybody who's tried to get that sort of support. And that's why we're so grateful for the funding which enabled us to do this. And in the same way, the Shoma usually match within 2 weeks following initial assessment so that people can get a befriender or mentor. And then the online sessions, over 70 different group sessions, over 200 different people participating. So our total, like I say, this was, I think at the end of October again, 327 different individuals engaged. So, and then our outcomes, and this is where you actually see, well, are you actually making a difference? So in averages out of 10, we ask people what their mood is. So the average rating, this is now from 58 people who've given us evaluations back, goes from 2.45 before engaging with our services to 5.93 after. And anybody who knows anything, to get that sort of nearly 3.5 point increase is quite remarkable. Similarly, confident making positive choices about their life, a 2.5 point increase. And then really positive in terms of the supportiveness of the person who's there, satisfaction high, and then the tough things, that improvement of mental health, and that's 4 out of 5 reporting that more positive with 6, 8s or 10s is what we do on our ratings. And it's similarly reporting improved overall well-being. So some really strong outcomes from what we're doing. So I hope that gives people a flavour of the response that we've put in place. And it's been an absolute pleasure to work with the Shoma. And I was involved with helping David Marshall when it was set up. And again, the two organisations coming together shows what we can really do with that type of partnership working.
Well, thank you for that, Johnny. I promised you all facts and figures. I hope Johnny hasn't worn you out with all of that, but it is great to see it in facts and figures, because sometimes you just need to see it in black and white to see what a difference it makes, and also the number of people that you've managed to reach. If I could go back to that initial evening, Rabbi, and ask you were there in the room, and I think you helped get it sort of almost televised. It was also streamed live as well at the time, wasn't it? Tell us about the mood in the room that night and what you remember.
Well, first of all, I remember the shock, as Johnny mentioned. I think, and as my memory has, I think there were 2 suicides. There was a third one that happened later on in July that year. But yes, there was the 2 suicides were, I mean, I lived between the 2 houses, sort of within, as a crow flies, 50 meters in each direction. So it's really, and they were both in Prestwich. And the first one, right, it hit the community, but and then when the second one hit, and as you said, I think there was also a bit of a cross-communal feeling in that, because the young woman in question here was, I mean, her parents daven in Yerushalayim, and they are, within the Haredi community, and yet she was part of Yavne High School. So that meant that, that whole sector of the community knew her as well. I think she was in 6th form, so that she was not only known to the Yavne crowd, but the 6th form in Yavne actually interacts quite a lot with KD as well. So she was known to a lot of the KD boys and girls. And so this is why it had such a widespread, I think it's just had a widespread effect. And everybody was sort of walking around a bit of a shock, because I don't know about you, but prior to that first incident that happened right before Rosh Hashanah with a young man who took his life, I don't, when I lived, for all the years I've been living in Manchester, I don't remember very many suicides. And I've been living here 13.5 years. I don't remember anybody, definitely not of that age group, doing it. So the first one was already a big shock. And then when the second one happened, everyone was a bit of a daze, because they're like, as one off, you might say, okay, there's one aberration, there's one individual that might have sort of gone out and done something crazy. But when somebody else then, or again, I have to be careful with the word that I used over here, but he'd done something, I think the word should be more extreme. I think extreme is an extreme reaction more than saying crazy. I'm sorry for that word. But, the extreme reaction that you get is, you know, people say, all right, one person with extreme, but when it happened twice, and this was somebody, again, as we said, that was across all boundaries, I think it was a beautiful thing that everybody said, look, we have to step up and we have to take responsibility. How many more victims do we need, chas v'shalom, 100 times over, until we take note of this? And therefore, I mean, the mood in the room, first of all, the fact that the room was so packed, the mood in the room was very hopeful, because it meant, look, people are coming out and supporting this event because they see the importance of this. And mental health has often been shunted away on the side as sort of like, yeah, you know, just get yourself together, get your act together, and you'll manage fine. And we realize now that A, that's not the case, and B, that it is really an issue that people are willing to engage with, which maybe previously they hadn't been willing to engage with. So for me, joining that, it was a special evening in that sense, at least.
Well, thank you for that. We're going to bring in Dr. Sandy Mann. She's waiting in the waiting room. I'm going to admit her. 1 second. Good evening, Sandy.
Hi there. Can you hear me? We always got to start with that. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. We can see you. Very colourful artwork in the background.
Thank you. This is what I've been doing for my mental health, actually. This is my the artwork. We've done a lot of art programs and craft programs with Jam. And this isn't actually what I've done with Jam, but this is actually stimulated me to do my own stuff. One of the things that we're really keen on is that we promote mental health, not just waiting for people to have mental health problems, but that we're promoting good mental health. So when we started to do these art therapy, not just art therapy, but time for me sort of programs for busy people. And I'm a very busy person, but I've learned that you have to take time for yourself. It's really important. And these are some of my results. These are some of my efforts. Some of you might recognize it. If you look up Stephen Brown, it's inspired by Stephen Brown, who's an artist.
Oh, yeah, I do like Stephen Brown. He does those fantastic sort of the bulls with the all different colours. Yeah.
Yeah, the cows, Highland cows.
You're very talented, Sandy.
Pardon?
You're very talented.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay, so Sandy, I should probably introduce you as Dr. Sandy Mann, Chair of Jewish Action for Mental Health.
Actually, I was chair and I am founder, but I've moved on to become clinical lead now for Jam. I can't do everything, so the chair now is Rabbi Nir Nadav, who is very, very ably taken over the role. So I'm now clinical lead. So I look after the clinical side, the therapy, the counselling, and all the actual mental health clinical work.
Okay, so Johnny, you need to update the website accordingly.
Yeah.
But
I don't do the website. What can I tell you?
You know what, though? It just demonstrates how fast-moving this whole project is. It really has. The whole COVID and the pandemic has moved us on from a very young organisation. I'm sorry I missed the beginning. I've had other commitments tonight. But I heard the tail end of you talking about that amazing, our first inaugural event last February. And we were a very young organisation, but we've moved on so fast and things are moving so quickly that, yes, we're not able to update everything. But the most important thing is what we're doing. And we're doing so much with other organisations, not all on our own. You know, the community is doing so much in terms of mental health now, which is only a good thing.
Well, Sandy, can I then ask you, just to go back to that evening and go back to the sort of three events that precipitated that evening being necessary, and it was a bit of a soul searching for the community as a whole. Why do you think it is? I mean, as somebody that's worked in mental health pretty much all their adult life, why do you think it is that we as a community have struggled to talk about this so openly? This is unprecedented, what's going on at the moment. For us to be talking about this like as openly as this was a subject that was really shunned for many years. It was something that was seen almost as a weakness, as a stigma, as something that we wouldn't directly want to air in public. So why is that the case?
Well, it's not unique to the Jewish community. This is really reflecting the wider community. And I think small communities that are sometimes insular and sometimes very protective and sometimes separate from other communities, or the wider community, or sometimes can be a little bit following the wider community, but we are following the wider community. And this stigma, this shunning, this not talking about it, it has not been any different in the wider community. And it's still there. It's still a stigma. There are still people. It's definitely better. It's definitely massively improved. But it's not just the Jewish community, but there are lots of reasons why certain sectors of the Jewish community still struggle to talk about it. But I think things are improving, and I think it's taken a few horrific shocks in this community to make us or force us to open our eyes. And things are changing dramatically. And really, the amount of mental health provision now compared to 2 years ago is incredible. And there's lots of reasons for that, to do with the circumstance. And I think COVID as well has had a massive impact on mental health and provision in the community. And it's good that we've got so much provision, but I think we've still got a long way to go in terms of people's attitudes towards mental health, not just in this community, but generally, that it's not a weakness and we should prioritize mental health and people with mental health problems. I mean, it's most certainly not a weakness. It's something that is just so common. I mean, I'm in the privileged position to know really what's going on with people more than anybody, perhaps, because I see it, and I don't see everybody, of course, and so there are people that even I don't know about. But nothing surprises me anymore. You know, when people may say, "Oh gosh, I can't imagine him or her having a mental health problem," and I just kind of go, because nothing surprises me. It's not, nobody's immune from it. Nobody is protected from it. It doesn't make anybody weak or strong. It's just one of those things like catching a cold or catching COVID.
And it's the fact that it sort of hits all cross sections of our community, but also in terms of ages. So that the cases that we talked about early on this evening were particularly surrounding our young people. And okay, so a stereotypical view of youth and childhood is that it's a carefree time where everybody should be sort of happily traipsing their way through their school life and getting to the end of it. But that's not necessarily the case.
It's so worrying. It's so scary, because it used to be that the peak age for young people to come to me, I mean, talking maybe 10 years ago, the peak age that people were coming to me was student age, 18, 19. It's still very much a peak age, but that was the sort of the main age of young people. In the last 5 years, it dropped to what I'd say about around year 8. So around 13, 14 definitely became the peak age when people came to me. And when parents would ring me and say, "I'm ringing about my daughter," I'd say, "How old are they? Are they by any chance 13-ish?" And they always were. But now I'm starting to get much younger. Year 6 is very, very common. That's about age 11. And right down to year 4 and 5, that's becoming more common. So it's becoming younger and younger. And some of the things that I'm seeing, some of the problems that are coming forward from those age groups, even from 8 or 9, you're starting to see the creeping effects of really social comparison. Really, this is a big, big factor. You're starting to see this, especially with eating disorders and body image and other people judging you and social bullying. Those are really strong factors starting to come into younger and younger ages.
And it's 10 years actually since we lost the Jewish Youth Project, which had for 15 years done some of that preventative work, engaging young people early, that positive work that Sandy talked about, and that's left a real gap in terms of that that youth work that meant that young people had somewhere to turn to. And there are some fabulous people engaging young people, but we really do need that professional response. It is still a gap and something we're going to look to fill. And the other point that Sandy made about stigma, it's 5 years ago, Sandy probably remembers our research that we did in the Salford Jewish community. And what we found there was that 33% of people said that mental health has some stigma in the community. 46% said it's still a big stigma. So that really tells the story. When those sorts of numbers, nearly 4 out of 5 people are saying there is a stigma, it's a problem. We really do need to start to respond. I'm aware that you've got Sandy here. I'm going to bow out if that's okay.
Johnny, thank you for joining
Johnny's
us.
very good for stats and figures. He's brilliant at that. So hang around, and because it's always useful to have those numbers. I'm less good at that.
We've shared those. You are much more competent than I am talking about mental health. I'll leave you to it, Sandy.
Mutual appreciation.
Thanks for joining us. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, Johnny.
Yeah, I can see some comments coming through as well from people. Sheila saying,
so good evening, Sheila. Thanks for joining us this evening. Sheila's come straight from the tribute to Rabbi Sachs that happened earlier this evening. Sheila says, so sad to hear that children are now suffering so young.
It is sad, terrible. It's very distressing.
Is there something parents can do to support? I think the word support, even before support, is really to create either prevention or education for the children so that they shouldn't start going down that route.
That is very, very difficult. Parents are always saying to me, what can I do? What can I do? I feel that as parents, we're fighting a losing battle against the multitude of influences on them that become more and more important to them than their parents. And however much we try and bolster their confidence and in terms of their abilities and their appearance, which is very important to them, and their popularity and all of this, nothing can compare to the judgments of their own peer age group or what they see in the media and social media. So it's really very, very difficult.
Well, as you said earlier, Deborah Fraser echoes that. The numbers suffering are certainly as high in our community as the wider world. But I guess the world these days, I mean, Johnny was talking about 10, 15 years ago, but if you think about the world of an average teenager today compared to that of 15 years ago, social media was virtually unheard of. And if it was in such a sort of a raw format that it didn't really make it what it is today. Today, the need for recognition, almost adulation in some ways, the need for we've fostered a society where our value and our worth is counted on the number of likes we get. Yes, it's a little bit of self-validation. When you post something on social media, you are in effect asking people for their validation of what it is that you are communicating to them. But it's also a form of peer pressure. This is something that we're all under pressure to do, because if you don't conform and you don't play ball, you're going to get left behind.
And it's the same for adults. You know, I see this more and more with adults as well, where social media is a massive impact on them and their mental health. But with children, of course, first of all, they haven't known any different. That's how they've been brought up. But it's much more invasive, much more pervasive. And I think that although it's very hard for parents to do much, I think schools could do more. And I'm not criticizing schools at all, and our local Jewish schools. I'm not criticizing them at all, because they're struggling under resources and all those sorts of things. But I think that that's where you've got the young people. That's where a lot of the social comments and the bullying and the issues will start, when you've got the young people together. So I think I really wish there was more resources in schools, that there was more resources put into schools. Many schools do have some kind of mental health support. Very often they're not professional, they're not accredited, they're just maybe some, and this is not knocking any teachers or anything like that, but teachers who may have an interest in it rather than professional training. And why should they? Why should, you can't expect teachers to be trained counsellors and therapists. But I think there will be a day when, every school will have a full-time counsellor, trained, properly accredited counsellor. But there needs to be other work. There needs to be work constantly done on bullying and social validation and the effects of that, and working with people. Young people can be very cruel, and we all know that. We've all grown up in those situations, and it's not their fault. It's just the way kids are. But work done with young people can really help to bolster their individuals and help them understand the effects on other people. So I think that actually schools can do more than parents. But maybe it's up to parents to sort of put the pressure on, not on schools, it's resources for schools, but maybe government and central bodies to provide that funding.
So my wife, who used to be a teacher, used to say that actually she found it very difficult with the bullying in school, because she said bullying can happen on the playground. And she said she used to teach in a girls' school. So she said in girls' schools, this was a lot more frequent than it was in boys' schools when she taught in both. But she said that she saw, one girl could walk past another girl, drop one quick comment, and then walk away again. And that is so quick. She said that no matter how many teachers and how many professionals you have in the playground, you cannot catch every single bully. It's just impossible for schools to do that. Right.
She's right. Absolutely right. And it's very hard. That's why I'm saying we can't. blame the schools. You know, they can't stop the bullying. Bullying is very, very hard to stop. It's very, very hard. And I know a lot of parents are very, you know, whose kids are being bullied, are very angry that schools are not doing enough. But you're right, it's very, very difficult to do. It's an approach. Mental health is an approach that needs to come from lots of different angles. And we can only do so much. You know, we can't stop it all. We can't wave a magic wand, but we've just got to do what we can and help prevent it and pick up the pieces when it becomes a problem.
Well, we've got some comments coming through, so we'll address those as they come in. First of all, a comment earlier from Clive. Good evening, Clive. It's been great for Neshama and JAMH to work together. And Johnny responds to that. Absolutely, Clive. Hopefully we'll see such collaboration becoming the norm in our community.
Can I just come in? Neshama are one of our partners, and they do fantastic work. They do a lot of befriending. We do a lot of counselling therapy. We're a natural fit, and we've become partners and working together very closely. That's what we want at JAM. We want to work with organisations and people who are already doing stuff out there. We don't have to provide everything. You know, we work with the organisations to try and provide things from different organisations, and there are many organisations in this community who are also doing amazing work with mental health. Okay, well, let's talk about that briefly, because on your website, and initially I think the way that Jewish Action for Mental Health was envisaged, that this was to be an umbrella organisation, effectively drawing on the existing resources from within the community and the wider mainstream community as well, right. Just to help with this particularly acute issues that we saw at the time. But what would you answer to people that now perhaps comment that Jewish Action for Mental Health, by providing therapy directly themselves or facilitating that, you've become a service provider as opposed to sort of an umbrella organization? Does that in any way, is there a conflict there, or is it just something that was a natural evolution of your service? That was always our plan. Our mission statement from the beginning was to be an umbrella organisation and to meet needs or gaps in services where we found them. So the original gap that we found, because we weren't going to do the same thing that other organisations are doing, there's no point. But the gaps that we found, we were always there intending to fill either ourselves or to help other people to do that. So the first gap that became apparent as a need was to provide a placement training scheme for new therapists. So we want to grow professional accredited therapists and counsellors in this community. This is something I'm really, really strong on. We have to have properly trained, accredited professional counsellors and therapists. And there's been a too much reliance, especially in certain sectors of the community, on non-trained and non-professional and non-accredited people who are perhaps recommended or perhaps have always been doing it and this sort of thing. And what we're trying to really do is say the very first thing you need to do is to have somebody who's properly qualified and accredited. So that's our first gap, and that's the first thing that we started to do.
Could you just elaborate what is considered accreditation, so for anybody who's listening that they can know at what level somebody starts becoming accredited?
Yeah. So generally, you're looking for the following letters after the name. They need to be a member of the BACP. They need to be an accredited member of the BABCP, or one of these. They don't need to be all of these. They need to be registered with the HCPC. And then there's some other ones, like they need to be, if they're doing EMDR as a therapy, that's got its own accrediting body. So it gets a bit complicated, and that's not an exclusive list. And there are some people with more unusual qualifications or come from a different country. So it does get a little bit complicated. But we will try, if they're not sure, they can ask us. They can ring our helpline and say, this is somebody who's been recommended. These are their qualifications. Is that okay? And we're more than happy to help out. But we've got to change this attitude of having somebody that's just recommended and they're not qualified.
So it's not to say that there are a bunch of charlatans out there that are providing services that there shouldn't be. It's more that to get proper help and to get help that is actually safe, because let's face it, we are playing with people's lives ultimately if they get the wrong sorts of care. So it's very much more that sort of way, isn't it?
Well, yes. I mean, definitely we have to know that everybody's got minimum standards, and that's something that we're very keen to promote. And when you haven't got those qualifications, you don't know what training people have got. And this isn't a problem just in the Jewish community. This is a problem for everybody. In the wider community, it's very difficult to know who to go to and what qualifications you're looking for. And that's not to say that we don't have our own homegrown fantastic people, but just going back to the original question, that was our first goal. COVID-19 changed our focus dramatically, because we were going along with that. We're doing a trial with the placement scheme. COVID-19 happened. We had all these people with sudden dramatic mental health problems, or that were affected dramatically by COVID. So we quickly put in place a therapy scheme where we provide free therapy and counselling. So that wasn't something we envisaged happening so quickly. It was part of my grand plan 5-10 years down the line, but it's come much more quickly. But there's a gap in the service there, and that's what we provided, and that's what Jam was always about. It was about meeting needs. We do Purim events. We're out on the streets in Purim, keeping people safe. That's a service provision. We've done a showcase, I think we did in your hall as well for that. That's a service provision. So we've always been about providing services where those are needed, as well as being this sort of one-stop shop for mental health provision in the community.
And I guess what's amazing, and well, look, if anybody's been unlucky enough to have to sort of apply for this, but in the wider world out there are some free counselling services, very few and far between, but the waiting lists are absolutely astronomical, aren't they? And in terms of the amount of time you will wait to get professionally assessed and seen is unprecedented. But you guys, some used COVID almost as to accelerate. This is probably one of the good things to come out of it, that using technology as well, you've managed to accelerate the process of somebody getting to see somebody urgently. Because as I understand it, if you were referred, you could possibly get seen within sort of 24 hours. Is that correct?
In theory, you can. We'll triage straight away. That will come to me, and I will assign an appropriate therapist if it's appropriate. Having said that, we're not a crisis service. So we can't work with people who are in acute crisis as a replacement for A&E or immediate crisis intervention in the NHS. So it's obviously limited in what we can do, and nor can we really provide. We're providing short-term provision. We can't provide long-term care where people need sort of a year, 2-3 years, that sort of thing. But people who are in an acute situation, they're in a great deal of distress. And we can certainly provide counselling or therapy if it's appropriate to do so for free as soon as possible. Okay. Mainly by Zoom at the moment.
Yeah. What would you say to people that do need that 1 or 2 years worth of therapy and just can't afford it and can't get onto the NHS list?
So this is my biggest distress at the moment, because as clinical lead, I'm the one that's making the decisions, and we have a fantastic team of therapists, and sometimes they come to me and say, well, this person, I've done 6 sessions, but it's only just touching, the tip of the iceberg. What I'm hoping to do is to with Johnny is to try and get funding in place, and that's much harder for longer term therapy. So at the moment we are as frustrated as they are, and we can't offer a long-term service, because if we offer 3 people 3 years therapy, it means we can't offer 30 people a short-term therapy. So it is very frustrating for us, but we're limited. We're a very young organisation. We're limited in what we can do. We've helped a lot of people. We know we can't help everybody. And for me, that's very distressing, but it's the reality.
We're grateful to have you with us, and I know you've got fairly limited time tonight, so we're going to try and get through.
No, I've got a bit more time than I thought I did.
Okay, great. So we'll get through as many of the comments and questions as possible. So anybody's got comments or questions, as usual, pop them in the comment section on either YouTube or Facebook.
One from Dov, actually.
So there we go. Dov Bunyak of Kurtzman. Great to see this discussion taking place. So important. Excellent work led by Sandy in the community.
Let me just say something about Dov, because he's actually doing a lot of well-being type work. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, or I hope I'm not sort of misrepresenting what he's doing, but he's done a lot of stuff over Zoom, virtual stuff, and just really well-being, life coaching type stuff, and there's a massive place for that. So I think Kol Hakavod to Dov as well.
Oh, well done, Dov. So we've got some questions here as well. Janet Marks, do you feel that the demise of youth clubs has had an impact? So, Sandy, before you answer that, I'm going to bring in Johnny's comments as well, if you don't mind. He's obviously watching there in the wings, but Johnny states that it's not so much that the youth clubs, but the professionals who were there who could support young people. And he goes on to say that there's still some fabulous youth leaders throughout youth movements and new organisations that have developed in the Haredi community, but they need professional youth work support. So on the most basic level, I mean, obviously, look, there's the Scouts, the Girl Guides, all that sort of kind of organised youth activities, if you like. And then we had the ones that perhaps were familiar with within the Jewish community. There was things like Habonim, there was B'nai Akiva, there was Ezra. There were a number of different youth organizations, which I don't know, maybe it's just me and my nostalgic memory, but they seem to be a lot more prominent than I see them today. And when you think about it, you're relying on sort of providing youth leaders, if you like, that are teenagers themselves, providing sort of hadracha and being madrichin to people that are just a couple of years younger than them. At some point, though, as Johnny says, it's important to have somebody that's professionally trained in these things.
There's a much bigger emphasis on mental health in the youth sector today than ever before. So, for example, I know a bit about B'nai Akiva. I apologise if I don't mention other organisations because I don't know about all of them, but I know that they are taking mental health much more seriously than ever before, and that they do bring in professionals to give training on mental health provision, especially when it comes to camps and residentials. But you're right, it's not enough. And I've said for a long time that we need to have a professional. We actually need a counsellor at camp as well. I think residential camps are a breeding ground for mental ill health for a minority of participants. They always have been. And it terrifies me to think that you've got these young people in residential camps and Israel Machane, hundreds every year going to Israel on Israel tour. And it's actually quite scary to think that these are young people in very, very stressful situations and they haven't got the professional support. And that's no fault of the youth movements, but I think we're going to see a future where we have counsellors there as well.
And
I heard about that, by the way, because I've run a camp 4 out of the last 5 years. Well, last summer not, but and my wife has said now they're doing a really sort of like a shake-up of the camp because somebody who was a mainstay of the camp is now retired. They've been there for over 50 years, and now sort of it's time to reorganize that camp. And my wife said, as somebody who dealt with some of the girls, I mean, I dealt mainly with them, but my wife also, and she said, look, there's all these young youth leaders, 19, 20, 21-year-old girls dealing with girls, and girls sort of, especially when you're away from home, you start to open up to your friends. And I had to speak to people about, setting boundaries. If your friend is sharing with something with you that you're not comfortable with, you need to be able to create that boundary, because other girls were feeling like they've been burdened with all this stuff that they don't know what to do with. And that these camps really do need to have somebody there, even if not all the time, but at least coming in periodically to help people sort of like unload all this baggage that's happening. Because I saw it happening in front of my eyes.
It's youth groups, youth residentials and schools. And you're talking at the beginning about these horrific events in the community of young people taking their lives. Unfortunately, it's the tip of the iceberg. I personally know of several other serious attempts that young people have made, and that's just me. I'm just one therapist. I don't know everybody. And these are young people now in our schools and in our youth movements. I fear, really, really scared. It's only a matter of time before it happens again. I don't mean to be dramatic, but I'm honestly really, really scared.
Well, why is it that young people suddenly have been driven more to taking their own lives when they hadn't in the past? Something that we hadn't heard of so much in the last 10 years that has suddenly become a real talking point and an action point, sadly, for so many young people.
Well, there's so many different reasons, and these are not unique to the Jewish community, of course. But the pressures in terms of, I think, social comparison and social validation today are much higher, I think, than they used to be. Because not just because of social media, but because of expectations and the wider access to comparisons with a wider range of people. If you think about pre-social media to times, we would, when I was growing up, I could only compare myself to those people who I went to school with, who were probably quite like me because I went to the same school as them. And maybe if I went to B'nai Akiva, maybe I went, saw people in London or whatever, but that was it. But now you can compare yourselves to anybody across the world and everybody. And, everybody is there to compare and to make you feel that you're not actually good enough or you're not reaching the standard. So the social comparisons are more, the need for validation of yourself is stronger, but also I think there's more knowledge, more awareness of coping mechanisms. And let's face it, the coping mechanisms that young people and adults are using are the things that we're most worried about. Self-harm, there's websites and you can talk to your friends, and self-harm used to be something that was quite shocking and rare. And if somebody was self-harming, a young person, there would be fast track down the CAMS route to get the mental health support. Now it's just one of many people, and it's no fast track anymore. So they're learning about these things, they know about these things better, things that they may not have even thought of trying are now in the public arena and now talked about more, which is good maybe, but it's giving them access to different solutions. And these are solutions, these are coping mechanisms for young people. So they're giving them access to different coping mechanisms. So lots of different reasons. I mean, that's just a brief attempt to discuss some of them.
You've got a lot of comments coming here, so we're going to try and work our way through them. Phil Cohen, good evening, Phil. Thanks for joining us again. Does Jewish Action for Mental Health offer anything to those people who have disorders even more stigmatized than depression and anxiety? I'm principally thinking of schizophrenia or bipolar illness.
It's a very good question, Phil. Sadly, not at the moment, but it's on my agenda very much so. And we would love to be able to set up at the very minimum self-peer support groups for these sorts of conditions. So at the moment, we can't do everything. We're prioritizing the acute stages of distress whereby we can do a discrete piece of work to help them. So if somebody comes in and they have a diagnosis of schizophrenia or the things that you mentioned, and we can do a discrete piece of work with them that will take a few sessions, 6, 12, whatever sessions, then we can do that. But in terms of long-term management of conditions, we're not there yet, but give us time, Phil. We're just a couple of years old. Give us time. If you've got anything to suggest, or if anybody wants to suggest something or get in touch with us and say, hey, how about we do this piece of work or this program, we'd love to hear from you, because sometimes these things come from other people and beneficiaries of our services.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to work through some of the other comments. Deborah Fraser commented, and I think this was in response to me saying that there are long waiting lists. She says for adults, at least, I think she's referring to, not now, the NHS does not have particularly long wait lists. Jane Johnson, good evening, Jane. Very healthy young, previously CAMS is 3 months for assessment, for the 2 to 3 months for beginning therapy. So that's an awful long time, isn't it, to actually get into interaction with it? Yeah,
so we're seeing two different views there, and I think that reflects the lottery, really, in terms of getting access to services. There is definitely more funding available now, which is great, but I am still seeing people either through JAMS or through my private clinic who are having to wait. They're expected to wait 12 months. That's normal. Perhaps it's not solved for Deborah, or I don't know, but it's certainly common. I think it also depends on how you classify and how severe you are, but it is very difficult. There's just so many people needing these services, and that's the problem. That's always going to be the problem.
Clive Moss-Barkley, Clive wearing his Neshama hat tonight. Neshama, together with Mind in Sulphur, will be running an evening of mindfulness practice. Details Clive has published over there. You can go there. It's also on the Shrubs website. But an excellent question here from Taryn. Taryn Cohen, good evening, Taryn. How you doing? With the service being so in demand, what is the criteria to receive counselling through Jewish Action for Mental Health, and how are those decisions being made? And do you signpost people elsewhere, or are they just left to their own devices?
Brilliant question, Taryn. Hi, Taryn. So I'm going to answer the last question first, because no, we try not to leave anybody. We try and always refer people on if we can't help them, or if we're not the appropriate person, we're not appropriate body to help them. So we liaise with the Fed. We're very close with the Fed. We'll liaise with the Neshama, Keren, any of these other wonderful organisations that are out there. We'll work with them. In terms of our criteria for counselling, at the moment, we don't have a waiting list. At the moment, we can be quite generous in who we take on and who we offer counselling to, or I presume not just counselling, but therapy, actually psychological therapy or CBT therapy, cognitive behavioural therapy. The criteria they need to meet are they need to have a condition that we can help with in a relatively short period. So as I said before, it's short-term therapy. So if somebody comes to us and we think we can't do anything, we can't achieve anything in 6 or even 12 sessions, even 15 sessions, maybe even 20, we can't we're not going to even reach the surface or below the surface, then in those cases it might be more harmful than good to take them on and then say, right, this is all we can do. So in those cases we might not be able to take them on. If it's something that we don't feel is within our remit of that acute anxiety and distress or depression, we will help with trauma and things like that, but they have to be an acute short-term program that we can do. Ideally, it should be something for us in terms of our funding. It should be COVID related, so it should be something that's been exacerbated or made worse by the pandemic, which, let's face it, most mental health conditions are made worse by the pandemic, so that fits within our remit. But it does mean, and I hold my hands and say, it does mean there will be people that we are not able to help, and it's distressing for us. We will try and get those into the appropriate services. Sometimes that means us getting them into more acute care. Sometimes we feel that they need to be in services where they can get a multidisciplinary approach, and they need psychiatry and they need more holistic care. Sometimes we think the Fed would give them a better offer than we would, and that's fine. We'll try and help find the right place. Kate's just put a message up there in terms of what our number is. She's the person that answers the phone. She's fantastic. She gets a lot of positive feedback in terms of how helpful she is. So she really is the front line of our organisation, and she does, none of us want to leave anybody in distress. So we'll always try and help signpost in the right direction, even if we can't help ourselves.
Thank you for that. We've got another comment.
Can I also comment about Neshama and Clive? There are so many things that are going on in this community that it's absolutely fantastic. And Clive just mentioned the Neshama mindfulness. He is talking about befriending service. I think I've already mentioned that. Yeah, we work very closely with referring people on for befriending to Neshama. But in terms of events, there's stuff happening all the time. So Neshama put on events, and I've already mentioned some of the things that Dov's doing as well, Dov Ben Yaakov Kurtzman. So there's lots of organizations and people that are doing wonderful things out there, and that's great. All of these things can help.
And in some ways, I hate to say it in these terms, but COVID has been a blessing in disguise, in as much as, yes, this horrible thing has in many ways entrapped us in our houses and forced us into situations that we just don't want to be in anymore. However, they've delivered some fantastic efficiencies in terms of bringing people together without, that physical distance now doesn't particularly matter as much. So I talked to you earlier in the week, and you told me that we were talking about which bits of COVID would you keep and which would you give back. And I think that you mentioned that sort of therapy sessions that were virtual were just a lot easier to facilitate in some cases. And I guess all these fantastic programs that Neshama are running and that you're able to run, and the Fed and everybody else that's providing them, the fact that they're available at the click of a button, it's a miracle, really, isn't it, of our modern age?
It's actually mind-blowing what we can do and what we've had to do, and the benefits of that. And I really hope we carry those things through. What we're doing now, this is incredible. Nobody has to leave the home and pack themselves into a hall, and everyone can sit in their pajamas if they want, with a cup of tea, and do what they want. And I think it's so much more accessible. I think that's what it's about. There you go, accessibility. And therapy is so much more accessible. I know it doesn't suit everybody by Zoom or remote, but I find a lot of my clients are more relaxed in their own home, and they're more comfortable and they're more grounded. And there's just benefits. And I think we have to see the benefits where they're there, whilst acknowledging that obviously it's difficult for a lot of people. And I would like to talk at some point tonight. Don't let me forget about new mums if we have a time to do that.
We're going to do that in just a minute. We're going to just try and work through the rest of the comments that we've got. Phil Cohen, who goes on to say that he's had experience having worked in statutory mental health services for most of his professional life. He's been very involved with peer support, i.e. by people with lived experience of mental distress. Do you think that sort of support could have a place?
Absolutely, yeah. Phil, if you want to help us set up peer support, this is what we're really keen to do. I think peer support, lived experience, you can't beat it when it comes to helping with certain conditions. And I think it's absolutely essential. And actually, that does lead me on to talk about the new mums, because I know that we'll talk about that later. But we've got a very successful program for new mums and people who are pregnant or delivered during the pandemic. And one of the things that we try to facilitate is peer support with that. And through that, they have set up their own. They've got a WhatsApp group, and they go out they do a walk every Friday. So those are peer-led programs. It's all peer-led with that. Or there might be some facilitation from me. We meet every other Monday, but it's very much peer driven. So I'm a massive fan of peer-led programs, Phil.
Just picking our way through some of the other comments, Jane commented earlier that there were some terrible sources on the internet that encourage suicide. In some more sort of egalitarian and progressive societies in Scandinavia, I read an article about it. Suicide is I wouldn't say encouraged as an option, but it's very much something which it's discussed. It is almost it's one of your life options. It's something that you can do.
It's a coping mechanism, isn't it? I mean, that's how it's been. You know, as is self-harm. These are coping mechanisms, and people who don't self-harm or don't know about, who don't understand it. A lot of people don't understand it, but it's a way to stop the pain, and that's the same with taking. I don't like to call it suicide, but taking one's own life. I don't like the term committing suicide. It suggests, it comes from its origins of it being a crime. But taking one's own life, it's a solution. It's a coping mechanism to a problem. So we have to put it in that context and see that these are coping mechanisms, as are drug use and alcohol, and all these are all what we call maladaptive coping mechanisms.
And how are we getting better in terms of educating people, educating parents, for instance, because, in its most basic forms, you may say that self-harm, if it's discovered, could be a cry for help because, it's there. But in a lot of cases, it's flying under the radar. It's not really picked up on at school. It may not even be picked up on at home. So there has to be a certain level of education to parents as well as people in a position of sort of to mentor young children, if you like, at school, but to be able to spot these things. So do we as a community still have a lot of work to do in terms of educating parents of the signs to look for?
Of course we do, but who doesn't? We all have a lot of work to do. We're never there. So it's the same with the wider community. Everybody needs to. You can never have too much education in terms of mental health and the signs to watch for. But on the other hand, to put the things in perspective, and I like to have a bit of optimism as well, that we shouldn't be sort of necessarily over worried. And I think parents panic, understandably, if they find that their young person has been self-harming. Doesn't mean they're going to attempt to take their life. It doesn't mean they're suicidal. Self-harm is seen as it is a coping mechanism. Many people self-harm. It's very, very common. It doesn't mean that they're going to go on to have a life of distress. Sometimes it's a temporary coping mechanism. So just a note of optimism, maybe. And also, whilst I'm in an optimistic mood, just also to say that the whole pandemic has been positive for some people, actually. And not everybody's mental health has been negatively impacted, including young people. Some people have seen it as a very positive thing, and it's given them a better work-life balance and a focus on the things that really matter. And they've kind of, stopped the world and reset themselves. And, I'm speaking to a lot of people for whom this has been a positive experience, which doesn't help if it's been negative for you, but just trying to balance it a little bit and say, it's not all doom and gloom.
Fantastic. Deborah's also mentioned that there are other organisations such as Ezra Care who are running self-help groups looking for people also with lived experience. Joseph Stone, good evening, Dr. Stone.
Ezra Care is also a fantastic organisation. We're very lucky in this community to have so many fantastic organisations. We all meet with the Jewish Mental Health Network, and we all meet once a month and share and work together and develop programmes together. And Ezra Care is an important part of that.
And do you find that collaboration between the different organisations, has it perhaps over the past year and particularly over COVID, is it less, I wanted to say frictionless, but do you find the boundaries between these organisations breaking down and that sort of, because there is that sort of organisational pride, isn't there, that we do this and hands off sort of thing?
So it's a good point. I think this community is traditionally very fragmented when it comes to organisations, and organisations are very precious sometimes about their own remit and funding and those sorts of things. And we said from the start that we want to work with organisations. The organisations that we work with and we link with are the ones that are not precious about that. They're the ones that genuinely want to help, and they don't care how that help is given as long as the people get the help that they need. So the ones that we work the most closely with are the ones who we've just got common goals and we'll just get on and do it. Obviously, there may be organisations that are less involved with us for various reasons, but generally, I think there's so many organisations. I've got to mention Keren as well, a fantastic organisation that works with girls and female young adults with difficulties. We work very closely with them as well. I apologise if there's an organisation that I haven't mentioned that we work with, but really these are the organisations that are genuinely caring about people in the community, and it doesn't matter who provides that care as long as they're getting what they need.
Looking at some of the other comments, good evening, Dr. Stone. Joe is bringing up a fairly good point here. Not everybody wants to talk to somebody within the community, and there are resources outside in the wider world. So he's saying that people can self-refer to Healthy Minds if you live in Bury. You don't want to speak to someone in the community, and then Joe's included the number there, which you can all find in the comments section there. So that can be a factor sometimes. Sometimes we
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Look, we don't mind where people go as long as they're getting the help they need. Now, in terms of speaking to somebody in the community, we have got some therapists on our books who are not in the community, and sometimes, we will send the people to the right therapist. We will try and match them to the right therapist. It doesn't matter whether the therapist is Jewish or not, as far as we're concerned, in terms of finding the right match. Sometimes it's going to be a better match for a Jewish therapist. Sometimes people request a non-Jewish therapist. So we'll try and, for whatever reason, we'll try and meet their needs where we possibly can. But we're also very passionate about working with the wider community. And we have a very good relationship, particularly actually with Papyrus, who are a suicide prevention organisation for young people. We have a very close relationship with them, and they're in the wider community. They're a national organisation. Healthy Minds, another what we call IAPT in the trade, IAPT services. So those they're very good for what we call low intensity, people who need a little bit of help or need some help that can be provided by in a short number of sessions in those services. 6 Degrees, thank you, Deborah. Healthy Minds, 6 Degrees in Salford, Healthy Minds in Bury. These are all fantastic places to go, and I would certainly not hesitate to recommend those.
And Kate's popped on a comment over here. So I guess we have to be mindful that sometimes some of the things we've discussed tonight can be, I think sometimes the words that people use are triggering, isn't it? But if you've got any particular issues with anything that's been discussed tonight and you need to talk to somebody more urgently, Kate's posted the Samaritans number there that's always available 24 hours. And that's a fantastic service that has always... It's always been around for as long as I can remember. and a great deal of training goes into those volunteers that work for Samaritans.
Yeah.
I guess you're faced with doing the same.
Well, they offer a crisis line, so we don't offer that. They're very, very good. I've had over the years, I'm also a psychology lecturer. I teach applied clinical psychology at UCLan. And over the years, I've had a number of students who have been trained to be Samaritans. So I know that the training is very good. All the students that I've had who have been trained are fantastic. So they do offer a very good service. The more provision that we have in different sectors and different ways to access it, the better. You know, I don't think you can have too much. But certainly in terms of whether if people feel that they need to talk to somebody right now, they're a very good place to go.
Fantastic. Right. So tonight's discussion, obviously, we've covered quite a huge amount of ground since we started just over an hour ago. But to bring it back to where we were going to focus on, we were talking about COVID, and obviously we've already covered some of the efficiencies that you guys and I suppose some of the innovations that you've brought in order to help as many people as possible. But, you know, in terms of fundraising and the squeeze on public funds as well, because mental health services ultimately receive a degree of public funding, never enough. It's a bone of contention within this field, particularly that, you know, the provision for things that we can't sometimes tangibly see with our own eyes is not there on a scale to meet the demand. So talk to us about the strain that mental health services are under in terms of funding.
Yeah, it's a constant strain. It's always been the sort of Cinderella of funding and organisations, and it's been the last thought, really. I think it's changing a little bit now, but it's still absolutely imperative that this community starts putting more money. There's very little money that goes into mental health services. In terms of what we get from this community, very, very little. I know we haven't done a major fundraising drive as yet, but we've got, you know, most of our money has come from outside the community. We've had very, very little from the community. And I think it's the same with other mental health organisations. We really do need to prioritise mental health in this community and the organisations within this community. And Kate's put the donation there. I mean, I'm not here tonight to try and get people to give money, but if you do want to, then please do. Everything that you give us will go directly to mental health. You know, we're a very small organisation. We don't have lots of fat cats creaming off at the top or anything like that. So it all go directly there. I also just want to say a little word about confidentiality, going back to your comments about people wanting to speak outside the community. We offer a very much confidential service. It has to be essential. So all of our therapists are bound by their own professional bodies in terms of confidentiality. Sometimes I triage people and I actually don't know the identity of the people I'm triaging because Kate will know. They go through Kate and she may feel I might know them, so she'll give me the initials. You know, we take confidentiality very seriously, and the only people who know the identity will sometimes be me as clinical lead, but not always. Kate obviously takes the calls and the therapist, and that's it.
To bring it back to the community and perhaps to bring Rabbi Eisenberg back in, traditionally, and this goes back years and years and years, and it's a very good Catholic tradition, but it's also a very good Jewish tradition. That sometimes the people that would be privy to the secrets of the community and the congregants were very often either a priest or a rabbi, because people feel that within a certain context they're able to share matters of sometimes of life and death and certain philosophical questions, but also if they need help that they can go to nobody else for, they'll refer themselves to a rabbi who's obviously in a prominent position within that community in order to provide help. So Rabbi, this is a question to you, but also equally to Sandy. I guess these days in these updated circumstances, Rabbonim in general need training, and they also need as much information as possible. I guess it's not something that's generally covered when you're getting smicha.
I think what I would say is I'd make the comment that even if you got a bit of training, the people that Sandy is dealing with and the professionals that she's dealing with have been through rigorous training of years and years in universities and colleges, et cetera, and whatever a rabbi is going to get, or whatever rabbi, unless he himself is going to get a college degree in psychology or in counseling, a few sessions here, a few sessions there, what's that really going to do? You know what I mean? In the same way, I had a conversation this week with somebody about something in halacha. He says, I've also read a book. I said, yeah, but let's call a spade a spade. You might have read a book. I've been doing 20 years of advanced study, and it's the same thing. I can say I've read a book on mental health. Sandy Man has been doing mental health for who knows how many years. I'm not even going to say anything that's that's part of confidentiality for tonight. I will mention what Rabbi Ginsbury said to me very early on in my career, maybe even before I started. He said, David, you should know you are not a therapist, and never think you are a therapist unless you get a professional qualification to do so. And therefore, if people come to speak to you, you can see them. I wouldn't even say I would triage them. I would just listen to them, because people come to me and they want to unburden themselves. So I need to be able to say, yes, you can come, you can speak to me, you can unburden yourself. But he said, move them on after the first session or maximum the second session to a professional that can actually help them. Because whatever books I'm going to read and whatever few articles I'm going to have under my belt will never really compare with somebody that has done rigorous studying and proper qualifications for this. So I've not had that many people come to me anyway with mental health problems, but my stance always is, I'm not a professional. You can come, you can chat to me, and I'll refer you on to somebody who is.
That's brilliant advice. This gives me a really good opportunity to talk about both the blessing and curse of the rabbi in terms of their involvement in mental health. So the blessing first, that a lot of people will go to their rabbi first, especially in some sectors of the community. They will go to their rabbi first about anything, but certainly in terms of mental health. And that can be a blessing when you have some of the fantastic rabbonim that we have in Manchester. And I do want to single some people out, because there are some people very involved in JAM. For example, Rabbi Nir Nadav is very involved in JAM. He's a chair. Rabbi Daniel Walker is on our executive, so they're particularly involved. But I know, Rabbi Eisenberg, you've been very, very committed and very supportive of JAM, as has Rabbi Simmons at Steencourt. Apologies if I've missed anybody out. I'm really not intending to. But, there are some rabbonim who are very, very keen on mental health. And I know there are as well in other sectors of the community. And those are the blessings. Incidentally, I used to work very closely with Diane Westheim, Oliver Scholem, and was very, very saddened. It was a great loss to JAM and to myself as a professional, because he was my go-to person for Shilas in terms of mental health. He was very, very good at mental health issues and very, very keen to understand. And sometimes he would ring me up to ask me to understand more about some of the Shilas and queries that I was asking him about. So those are the blessings. Those are the rabbonim who know their limits, know their limitations, and I include Diane Westheim in that. He knew his limitations. And the problem is, and the curse of going to your rabbi with the problem is, it's a bit like going to a rabbi and saying, I've got a pain in my chest, what should I do? And the rabbi saying either, well, this is what you should do, or let me refer you to somebody that I know who's got a very good history with working with people with chest pain. They're not a doctor, but they've got a very good history. And so one of the problems, which we wouldn't do, and obviously they wouldn't do, but one of the problems can be that in some sectors of the community, they're not referring people to professional, qualified, accredited counsellors and therapists. And I really want to change that culture. We have to have as a baseline, and I'm not saying that having that baseline makes you a great therapist and counsellor, but it's a start. You have to know that people have got the right credentials and they've got the supervision and the insurance, and they're working to the standards of the accrediting body and all those sorts of things. And I'm not saying there are people out there who are not good, and there may be brilliant people there who are not accredited. I hold my hands and say there may well be. But we've got to have a baseline somewhere, and we've got to stop the rabbonim referring people to people who are not qualified or not accredited, or both. And we've got to make sure that rabbonim understand the limits of what they can do. But having said that, sometimes people just want somebody to listen, to hear them, to sympathize, and if your rabbi does that for you, it can be very powerful. So it's a double-edged sword. We have to use the the resource of the rabbi, which I think we're very lucky in this community to have such brilliant resources, but in the best way and get the right balance.
Okay, that's superb. We're going to pick up on a few more of the comments. One from Johnny, which is a shameless plug for funding, but I guess it needs to be said. We do have to thank the Jewish Leadership Council and also the Greater Manchester Healthcare Partnership for their support, as well as those in our community who have donated. However, there is much more to do, and to sustain this level of support, we would be grateful for whomever can support us. Jane goes on to say that.
Sorry, can I just say it is a good, and I know we're not here to plug and fundraise, but we won't be able to offer this free therapy forever. We've got funding mainly from COVID sources at the moment, or COVID driven sources at the moment,
and that won't be there forever.
It won't be there forever, and at some point we're this amazing service that we're offering will stop unless we get more funding, and that's all I'm going to say on that.
Okay. Jane has commented that rabbis are not often trained psychologists or psychiatrists, but on the flip side, I'd be more assured by a trained professional who also has Torah values than somebody completely irreligious. I guess that's the other side of that argument. People that want to refer to somebody outside of the community because they feel that they won't be judged within the sort of precepts of that community and those values. And then there are those people that do want those values as well, aren't there?
Sometimes you need a front therapist. I work with a lot of issues that you need a knowledge of Taras Mishpacha, family purity, for example, or you need to understand the halachas of checking vegetables if you have some with OCD. You need to have some understanding of religious and cultural issues, whatever. Those are just examples. But equally, there are times when you don't need that, and you need somebody who's a professional. So we'll always try and match somebody to the right therapist. And sometimes different conditions will need different levels of understanding, but there's no point if you've got somebody and their issues are deeply involved in religious issues. There's just no point sending them to someone who just doesn't get it.
Okay. Phil has said there is a useful distinction. I think he's maybe commenting on the discussions tonight between being a therapist and providing therapeutic helpful conversations. Because those are the conversations held presumably by those less qualified.
Definitely. And like I say, I know personally some Rabbonim that are very, very good at that, what's Phil calls therapeutic conversation. I've mentioned some of them, and then there'll be others I haven't mentioned, and apologies. But, there are people like that. And that's great. I'm not knocking that. On the contrary, I think that is so powerful. And like I say, I see so many people who just want to be heard, and they want to be listened, and they want to be validated. They want the problem to be normalized. And sometimes they don't always need therapy. That they need somebody like a rabbi that can give them that.
Well, Sandy, thank you very much. As Sharon Hood says, we are so very blessed with people in the Killer who care so much and work so hard for all of us. Thank you. And I guess that it's the lovely thing about you kept saying, I don't know if you've noticed this, but you've said it several times tonight. I apologize if I've left anybody out. So many organizations and so many individuals, but the fact that they are almost too numerous to mention, it just shows how we can, if we've got something to solve as a community, we can come together.
It's incredible, honestly. It's not just JAM, it's all these organisations I've mentioned and so many individuals. And when I look at my team, I call them my team, but the team of therapists that we've got together, we've got a family of therapists, mainly Jewish, mainly from, but not exclusively. And we meet every month for peer supervision. And I look at them, and they're all handpicked. They're all in the most incredible, caring individuals, and that's just our therapists, our paid therapists. And then we've got people that I go to the Jewish Mental Health Network once a month, and I see all these people representing mental health from all these different organizations, including the ones I've mentioned and some that I haven't, and I apologize. And it's just incredible how we're all there for one purpose, and that's what we're here for. It's not about me and being this or being that, or none of us. I genuinely feel none of us are about trying to be the chief here or trying to get a name for themselves. You know, it really isn't anything about that. And it's just genuinely all the people in these organizations genuinely care and want to help.
Well, I'm very, very grateful. I'm sure we all are on behalf of all the community.
Can I just say something else, David,
yeah,
before?
Sure.
I just want to say a big thanks to Shrubberies as well, because a lot of the schools, you know, we've had support from a lot of the schools, but I think Shrubberies has probably been the most supportive to us in terms of JAM and in terms of mental health, right from the start, right from the first in all that meeting in your hall. And Rabbi David, you know, Rabbi Eisenberg has been so supportive. And you know, we did another event just before lockdown, actually, on that Shabbos after shul in Shrubberies. And you know, the proactiveness. A lot of the schools have been very supportive of us. Don't get me wrong, but I think Shrubberies has been the most proactive, and you know, the most proactive in terms of us and JAM and mental health. So I just want to say, I know it's not a competition with schools, but you know, it's a huge boost to us to know that we don't have to ask. You know, you come to us and you're proactive. As tonight, we didn't set this up; you set this up. So huge thanks to you, David, and to Rabbi Eisenberg.
Thank you. You're always welcome. Well, I'm mindful that Rabbi Eisenberg has a share to get to, but there are still some questions coming in for you, Sandy. So if you don't mind, this is a bit unorthodox, but we're going to release Rabbi Eisenberg. Rabbi, is there anything you want to say in terms of closing tonight's conversation?
I think I'm not closing the conversation. I think the one thing that I would say is the following. You've heard so many important things tonight, and you still hear a lot more important things tonight. And I think what I would say is, having seen and met people close up who have dealt with issues such as OCD, depression, anxiety, addiction, etc., these are real things. You know, people who think to themselves, you know what, I'll just shake myself off. I'll wake up tomorrow morning and I'll feel better, and I'll just, you know, I'll get up in the morning and I'll have a run, and after the run I'll have a hot shower and I'm ready to go to work and I'm okay. You know, we have to get a grip with it. That the fact is that these are real conditions, these are real issues that people are contending with, and I think we need to, we need to understand that we have organizations like JAM that are doing this fantastic work that can refer you on to real therapists who can give you real help. Don't hide anywhere. Don't think that it's just going to get better on its own. You might only need, as Phil said before, therapeutic conversations. You might not need a therapist at all, but you know, make that phone call. Come out of your cocoon, step forward and say, listen, I need a bit of help. Are you willing to give me that help? And the answer will be yes. You know, I'll share something over here. I'll share something personal, just I guess as in closing, for me at least. You know, after we had a young man in our community that passed away, Stuart Foster. I'm sure some of you remember that. David, I remember we had conversations about it at the time, because you were actually Stuart's neighbor from across the road. And I remember after that, the shul came to me and they said, look, we want to get you one session. I think he actually works with you as well. Do you have Melech David working together with you, Sandy? Melech
David is a fantastic guy, very, very involved in us, with us. And he spoke at that event that we did with us in your shul,
Yeah, so I went to Melech David, you know, and the shul said just for one session, you know, if you want more, you can have more, but for one session, just to clear your head of the trauma of what it was, which was a very, very traumatic time for all of us within our community, and for me, who had to deal with it on the front lines. And it showed a willingness from the shul to say, this is real, we understand it's real, and we understand that you as our rabbi are going through sometimes very grueling situations that will take their toll on your mental health, and we want to be there to support you, and we will be willing to actually put resources behind you to make sure that you feel supported in that way. And so therefore, this, you know, I just wanted to go ahead and mention that as I finish, that you know, this is an important topic. This is something that's real for many, many people. And the crazy thing for people on the outside is you look in and you say you don't understand it. Somebody who's never had depression, somebody who's never had anxiety, has a very hard time understanding somebody that does. So just understand that this is real, and don't think they're making it up, or the hypochondriacs, etc., etc. Give them the time, give them the space, give them the support, and refer them on to the right people, such as you, Sandy, or such as many of the other people that in the organizations that you're dealing with. And I'm sure we have the wherewithal and the resources to be able to help people. And please God, we should be able to help those people.
Thank you. Rabbi, I'm going to...
Thank you very much, David. Thank you for a great evening. Thank you, Sandy. That was really fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Sandy,
I'm glad Rabbi Dovin mentioned Melech David, actually, because I've not mentioned him so far. He's one of the people that I ask for advice sometimes. So he's absolutely crucial and a fantastic therapist as well. And he's got an organization called Pathways. Trying to mention as many of the people in the community who are doing sterling work with mental health.
You've got some fantastic comments coming through and some questions. So I'm just going to try and cover the rest of those. Most of them are thanks, Sandy. So you've got a thanks for an excellent evening discussion.
Phil, that was thanks to you as well, because you've given us some of that food for thought, some of those elements for discussion. So thank you, Phil.
I do just want to clarify. I know we mentioned Stuart Foster before, but I have had some messages this evening as well. Just want to clarify that Stuart's sad death was not connected in any way to mental health issues at the time. It was just something that had obviously a repercussion in terms of those people providing support to family and community around those issues.
Distressed about, but no,
Okay, Laura Nathan, good evening, Laura. When you refer to the art therapy work that you are referencing, the therapeutic Zoom art sessions, is there an art therapist that offers one-to-one therapy, or is this sort of a global thing?
Oh, thanks for clarifying that, Laura. Right, so there's a couple of things here. Yes, we offer our art classes, which are run by somebody who's a therapeutic art worker, Chava, who's fantastic. That's not art therapy as such. We have had one or two sessions that we would call art therapy, but those are different. One of those was for our new mums. New mums, I know I've been banging on about new mums, but new mums have really struggled in the past few months. It's been very, very difficult. So we've got a very strong program for them. We did do a session for them. And we actually did a session that's perhaps more akin to art therapy with our actual therapists, because therapists need a bit of me time too. And I want to look after all of our therapists. But yeah, we don't offer, we have been offering limited one-to-one art therapy for some children. But unfortunately, I don't think we've got funding to keep doing that anymore. So that isn't something that's going to be part of our offer, unfortunately, at the moment, which is a shame, because it's great. But we, like I always say, we can't do everything.
And the reason why it is that much more sort of difficult for young mums, I suppose, that when you've got a new baby, almost the other young mums provide that support network, don't they? And if you're not unable to at this time sort of meet face to face, your child's not getting sort of any interaction, and you're not getting any of the same interaction. It's hard to stay in one place with all of that going on. It sort of takes over your life a little bit.
Even more than that, we've got mums in the group whose babies have barely seen anybody. You know, they might be 9 months old now, the babies, and the mums aren't getting the support from their family, their parents or their grandparents that they might have got in the past. And it's lonely, it's isolating, it's a struggle. They've perhaps gone through the majority of the birth process on their own without support, antenatal visits. They may have issues afterwards, and you know, it's a very lonely process at the moment, and it's very tough. And they're really, a lot of them are struggling. Not everybody, but a lot of them are struggling. If you know anybody who is, please, we've got a fantastic group. We meet every other week just for a chat, and then they meet up and go for a walk with their babies, and we put on art sessions sometimes. We want to look after the new mums of our community.
Great work. Okay, so some of the other comments, mostly just thanks. So I'll run through those for you, Sandy.
Nice.
Thank you, Sandy. It's been a truly excellent evening of information. Jane goes on to say, thank you for all of JMH's work. It's absolutely amazing. Kate is throwing it back the other way. Thanks to Ian Creek, who always lets us use the Shrubberies Hall. Yes, he's very persuasive with our treasurers, Mr. Creek. Always happy to support vital organisations such as this. Ian himself, very informative evening. Clive says that Neshama is grateful for all the kind things that have been said about our services this evening.
Well deserved, genuine. I'm not just trying to suck up to people or organisations. I have got no time for that. It's all genuine, Clive.
And again, Ian, thanks to Sandy and all her hardworking team for all the fantastic work that they do in the community. Simon Cohen, well done, Sandy. We are lucky to have you, your team, and the other organisations that you've mentioned. And that is it. So from me as well, thank you very much for taking the time. I feel like this is a subject that people could. I mean, most of the people that started watching this an hour and a half ago are still with us. I can see the numbers here in the corner. So it's clearly a topic that engages people. So perhaps if you'd like, we'd have you back again, because I'm sure we've only covered just the tip of the iceberg with this particular issue. It's not going away.
No.
Something that we need to talk about more openly. And I guess the past 3 weeks for me, in terms of what we did one on domestic violence. We did one on security, which has I know you're very much involved with us, or were very much involved with it.
I'm still very involved with CST, and in fact, I sometimes have conversations with CST about mental health as well. They're very keen on mental health in terms of events that might impact on the community. And
so you've got mental. So we had domestic violence, we had security, and we now have mental health, which to me form 3 topics upon which as a community we don't discuss enough, but we need to. It's not something that we want to talk about necessarily, but we need to encourage as many people as possible to start having open conversations about. And I hope that the last 3 weeks in some way has enabled to kickstart those conversations and for us to talk more openly. You've all got the details that have been posted online by Kate in the comments. If anybody does need any help and you want to get in touch, you know how to do that. Sandy, thank you very much for your time tonight, and thank you everybody else.
Thank you, and for inviting me and for this brilliant series that you do. I think it's brilliant, and thank goodness for Zoom and for this whole situation. We wouldn't be able to do it without it, would we? So
no, it's fantastic. It's been a real pleasure to be able to do it. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.